Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil Requiem, and this might be one of the most interesting games that Capcom has made in years. It feels like two completely different Resident Evil games that have been stitched together, and it works. After 13 hours, 9 in-game, I was able to finish my first playthrough, and I'm already excited to go back for all the trophies and to mop up the platinum. RE9 is brilliant in so many ways, and I had such a fun time, but that doesn't mean that there were some parts that were underwhelming. And while those underwhelming parts do weigh heavy on my opinion of the game, I think this game overall is a big win for Capcom, and that's clear with the amount of people that are playing it, the reviews that it's getting, the high scores, and the amount of sales that they're making with this game. I really think Resident Evil 9 is one of the best games that we've seen in a very long time, and I'm really excited to go back in and just play more. So with that being said, let's get right into it. When I first booted up Resident Evil 9, I started on the moderate difficulty and didn't hit a game over screen within my first few hours. That didn't mean that this game wasn't tense. Playing as Grace immediately felt comfortable because of my experience with RE7. A lot of the game mechanics and a lot of the UI were very familiar. The controls were familiar, the pacing was slower, and the tension builds in small spaces, especially when you're playing as Grace. Inventory didn't punish me early, but it was clearly limited, and I knew it was going to punish me later on in the game. The way that Grace was portrayed, constantly being scared, hesitant, it adds to the vulnerability of this character, and I was really getting into her shoes because she was experiencing some pretty intense things early on. But after that, when the game switches to Leon, it really feels like you're playing Resident Evil 4 Remake again, but with way more action. Knee shots, melee kicks, aggressive pacing. The tonal shift is almost immediate, and it made me smile because I love that game and I love the way that I felt while I was playing it, but I also had such good memories of playing Resident Evil 7 and going through those tight corridors and the scary experience. I was so happy to experience both of these things in such a short amount of time, and although it might have given me a little bit of whiplash, I think that it worked for Capcom. This is how this game is. That's how it separates itself from other ones. And I really think it's a great way for Capcom to celebrate the legacy and success that it's had over the past decade. Once you're done playing as Leon, you swap back to playing as Grace, and you end up in this big hospital, and it's one of the biggest highlights of her campaign. I love escape rooms in real life, and I honestly have done many of them throughout the years, and this felt like a massive high-budget survival horror escape room. You're solving many layered puzzles, you're backtracking, you're unlocking shortcuts, learning the map, and I really felt like this game hit the nail on the head when it comes to playing as a weak or vulnerable character. And the stalker enemies, the chef and Chunk constantly appearing in your routes made it even more stressful. I don't know if it was scripted or just bad luck, but so many times that I was trying to get from point A to point B, they would just appear and cause me to have to go to a different route, and that made me learn the layout more than I thought I would have to. It really made me appreciate what the landscape was and what this environment was that Capcom put together. Now, I will say I did get stuck multiple times playing as Grace. Maybe that's just because I'm not very big brain, but that happens in horror games, and as you stay in areas a little longer, as you die too many times, the fear does start to fade a bit. That's probably more on me than the game because I'm just not very smart, but it is very worth noting if that's something that you experience when you play these games. The blood collector tool was also a fantastic addition for Grace. It gave her just enough control to feel empowered without removing tension, and it was also a great way for me to manage my inventory and figure out what was important to me. But here's the thing, Grace feels significantly less powered than Ethan Winters did in Resident Evil 7, and I think that was intentional. She's much more vulnerable, she has much less health, her aim is much less, and I really feel like the weapons that she's given are just so much less powerful than what you had in RE7 throughout that game. I do like the tension from Resident Evil 7, and that's still going to be one of my favorite games of all time, and I really think they were trying to recreate something here with Resident Evil 9. And I think that they did recreate it just in a different way. It really sold for me because I was playing as Grace. If I was playing as a younger or weaker Ethan Winters, I feel like it wouldn't have worked. But the introduction of this new protagonist really landed for me. Throughout the game, you swap back and forth between Leon and Grace, and I will say that the first third of the game is mainly Grace with a little bit of Leon, and then the second third of the game is mainly Leon with a little bit of Grace. And once you get to Leon's long section, that is where RE9 shifts gears completely. There's huge backtracking sequence where you're in a massive kind of open world / open level area where you're collecting 3 major items before you can progress, and I got lost here too. Again, probably my fault, but I liked that it made me engage with the map and really kind of learn what this big open level looked like. Then the point system came into play, and you actually get incentivized to kill these enemies instead of avoid them because, again, you're playing as Leon. And he's a major badass. He's able to do so many great things. You're able to pick up his weapons. You're able to use your hatchet. And you gain points from killing different enemies. You earn these points and spend them in an upgrade box. I immediately bought and upgraded the shotgun. And suddenly it felt like Mercenaries mode was baked into the campaign. Hordes, combat loops, and rounds of enemies with weapon experimentation where I was able to not only use the weapons that I had, but also the weapons that the enemies had, and that included a chainsaw. It was arcadey in a way that Resident Evil hasn't felt in a very long time for me, because I feel like Resident Evil 4, although it was silly, was still trying to take itself seriously. And although this one was also serious, I feel like they were able to take their foot off the serious gas just a little bit. My only critique is that I had so many points that I never really felt restricted with how I could spend them. I could basically buy whatever I wanted, and it would have been more interesting if it was a harder decision to make. Also, there's no merchant character, not even a nod to the merchant from Resident Evil 4. You just go to a box and you spend the points, and I guess it just spits it out at you like a vending machine. The box works fine, but a little personality there would have gone a long way, and I would have loved to see Leon interact with another person, or perhaps a mystery merchant again, just as a nod to what is arguably one of the most loved parts of Resident Evil 4, which is the merchant. They recreated him very well in Resident Evil 4, and I think that if they had introduced a new character, or maybe some other way of him getting these weapons with these points, it would have been good. Again, while playing as Leon, you return to the Raccoon City Police Department. And that's not much of a spoiler because it's revealed in the trailer, but revisiting this location from the Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remake and having my knowledge of the layout teased was a brilliant design. I wasn't there long, but it felt intentional. It was a great nod to where Resident Evil had been before. Like, Capcom had been building toward Resident Evil 9 for years, and I really wonder if that was always in the works, from the plan of the Resident Evil 2 remake all the way up to where we are today, and that made me smile. Leon's one-liners are also back in full force, especially in this part where you play as him for a very long time, and when he hits the main antagonist with cute little lines, I was giggling. He has so much personality here, and I really think the voice actor and the writing did such a great job at bringing a older and more frustrated and more angsty Leon into the fold in 2026. I think he fits here. He's still silly, he's still weird, he's still absolutely overpowered, but I loved playing as him, and I think that they did a great job at putting him in Resident Evil 9. I think this is a great addition to one of the many great games that he's in. One of the big surprises that actually hit me in the latter half of the game is that you actually fight armed human enemies. They're brutal. The zombies' bullets barely hurt Leon, but the human bullets absolutely destroy his health. And if you get seen by one of these guys, you're going to have your health almost depleted immediately. They required patience and positioning. It was a nice shakeup, and I actually had fun once I got the hang of how to fight these guys. Meanwhile, in Grace's final section, I have to admit that it was a little underwhelming compared to her hospital run. There's a part where you go back to Grace right after you're done with Leon. It's not very long, but there's significantly less puzzles. There's not a lot of keys. There's not a lot of routes for you to take. It's very linear. And although it is a little puzzling, I figured it out really quickly, and there was almost no challenge. You can literally run right past most of the enemies pretty easily, and it just didn't hit me as hard. That was unfortunately part of the climax as well. So I really think that that dragged down my opinion of the latter half of this game, especially because the first half was just so strong and such a great time. I have to say that the first 2/3 of Resident Evil 9 are very strong, and then the last third is strong, just not great. The returning villains were very fun to fight. I did ruin one for myself because I was able to hoard about 12 Requiem bullets, and then when it came to fighting this returning villain, I actually unloaded on him and beat him in about a minute, which was kind of funny, but it also killed the tension for me. The final boss was also very basic. It's a returning villain, and that's just not creative, especially because I had already beaten this guy in a previous game, and it felt weird for Leon's culmination in this game to be to fight this guy. I also didn't have a lot of ammo, and I felt like I kind of cheesed it at the end, but realistically, the culmination, the big end point, the big final boss just didn't really sell it for me. And the ending, narratively, was very interesting. It feels like Capcom is setting up DLC or a direct sequel for Resident Evil 9, which is interesting because I thought that this was going to be a big closing of the book for these legacy characters. I would be shocked if they didn't already have some type of DLC in development, and some of the returning legacy characters that weren't in this game should be in there. I feel like for a Leon-focused game, there are some characters that aren't in this game that should be in this game, and although some people are mentioned, their lack of presence in this game is a little jarring. So maybe DLC, maybe a sequel. We'll see what Capcom has up its sleeve. I absolutely trust them. But I will say for the last third of this game, I was just a little surprised and taken back and actually pretty underwhelmed for what they were delivering. So what's the final verdict on Resident Evil 9? Well, basically it feels like two games. Grace's tense, puzzle-heavy survival horror, and Leon's action-driven, arcade-inspired combat campaign, and somehow they coexist pretty well. I think Capcom did a great job of balancing both these characters and having not too much whiplash when you go back and forth between them. Not every section of this game lands equally. Some of the bosses feel underwhelming, and the difficulty balance could be tighter, especially towards the latter half of the game, but I did have a blast playing it. It only took me about 13 hours to go through my first playthrough, and I'm already excited to go back and mop up the trophies to get the platinum. And I can't wait to try the insane difficulty because from what I hear, they're changing things up and enemies are a little faster and much more difficult to kill. And as I play with the different game's special unlocks like infinite ammo or perhaps infinite rocket launcher, I will feel like an absolute juggernaut going through this game and trying to get the fastest time that I can. Resident Evil 9 is not perfect, but it's bold, creative, and confidently experimenting. And I'm always willing to give respect to Capcom because of the hard work and the great products that they put out. So I will put more of my time into this game, and I will absolutely give it my recommendation to anybody that likes what Capcom puts out and is interested and excited to see what they have for Resident Evil 9. Go and play it if you have a chance. But that's just my opinion. That's what I thought of Resident Evil 9. And if you had a different opinion, I'd love to read about it in the comments. I make an effort to respond to every single comments. I can't wait to discuss with you guys, and I can't wait to talk to you in the next one.
All right. Excuse me.